Hello everybody, welcome to the end of week live stream. I'm David Jones. I do this every Friday at 2:30. If you've never been on one before, we'll have a quick look at the major news events for next week in markets. Then we'll jump onto the charts, take a look at what's going on in markets, where the opportunities might be. And then if there's any stuff you want looking at, if you put it in the chat, thanks for that, AG Hassan, very kind. Put it in the chat and we'll jump in and have a look at those markets once we've looked at the usual stuff. I thought we'd just have before we get into the nuts and bolts, we'd have a look at the pound today. We had the pound, this is pound against the dollar. We had the UK economic news out this morning, the GDP for the UK, narrowly avoided going into recession. Quarter on growth, 0% growth in the UK economy between, I can't even remember, October and December last year. That sounds about right, doesn't it? So the previous quarter was negative for the UK. So if we'd had a negative quarter again, we would be technically in recession. We avoided it though. Well done us. But zero growth. But I thought it was interesting. The pound, I found it a bit of a scrappy week this week, I must admit. I've got no great trading wins this week. It's all been a bit backwards and forwards, no real direction. And I think the pound perhaps shows that. I mean, we had a good run in the pound for 3 days, pound against the dollar. Traded up to 121.94 yesterday. Sold off a bit, and we're back where we were yesterday morning. I think it's still interesting though. You know, even though the market sold off, it's still well above yesterday's lows, around 120.50. So I think that could be an interesting market to watch next week. Let's see. Anyway, let's get the housekeeping done and we can go back to the markets. Let's just do a risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay. There's a lot going on next week. We did have Chinese inflation out in the early hours of the morning for me today, slightly lower than expected, I think, the Chinese inflation. And going into then we had that UK number, UK GDP. Monday, Japan GDP. Could be interesting. How well is the Japanese economy doing? Tuesday, Eurozone GDP. What's happening in the Eurozone? And then probably the big one for next week, US inflation. So Tuesday, 1:30 UK time, so an hour ahead of the US market open. US inflation data, that'd be interesting. I think I've said in recent weeks, I think we are past peak inflation. So it'll be interesting to see what that number comes in looking like. The head of the Fed this week did say, after we had those really strong employment numbers a week ago for the US, that if US employment stays strong, interest rates may peak later than expected. So we'll see. Still obviously a lot of focus on inflation and interest rates. And then on Wednesday next week, we've got UK inflation. So it's a big 24 hours from Tuesday lunchtime onwards for US and UK inflation numbers. So really well worth watching. I think those next week, some major events. A quick plug from the sponsor, which is still me. I run a trading course. There are 2 courses within the course. There's a medium-term trading course. There's a shorter-term trading course. So medium-term, I've got more back into medium-term trading this month because I do like it rather than having to look at markets every day. But medium-term, looking to run positions for weeks and sometimes months. Shorter-term trading, normally running positions for hours and days. Typically run them for 2 or 3 days, I think, in the shorter-term trading. So there's various video lessons that make up the course. In addition to the video lessons, there are live webinars with me. If you're on the course, run them every month. Live sessions where we just talk about trading and expand on some of the content in a bit more detail. I think they've proved really useful. And there's also a WhatsApp group you get access to. So I launched a WhatsApp group beginning of Jan. 1 or 2 updates during the day from me. on what's going on in markets and just ongoing support for those who've been on the course, because we all know trading's hard. Most people lose money. So I tried to structure it all. So, you're not just, once you've watched all the videos, that's it. There's a whole load of support afterwards. So that's the trading course. If you've watched this before, you've seen this before, but as part of the sort of launch of the trading course, the short-term course in last year, I think there's a real smoke and mirrors with trading education. Everyone's really cagey about numbers. I don't believe that a lot of the people out there running trading education are profitable traders. So I thought, well, what can I do? So I showed this account that I traded from the end of October to the end of Jan. I talked about it a lot on YouTube, on these live streams and stuff. And that was the result after 90 days of trading the approach. I talk about the approaches I talk about in the course. With a £4,000 account, £100 risk per trade, the booked profits were just under £2,200 over those 90 days. There's the report from the broker that I traded with. Much better than I expected. 55% return in 3 months. If I could make that every 3 months, I'd be very happy. I was absolutely expecting to be profitable. I thought it would come out more like 15 to 20%. So it was really good return. There are more details about the returns, etc. on the website. Trustpilot reviews, because I understand it's obviously taken a bit of a leap of faith to go and do a trading education course with some bloke off the YouTube. So if you go to David Jones Trading on Trustpilot, I've started asking people who've been on the course to leave reviews, and some of them kindly have. 8 5-star reviews. I don't know why Trustpilot scores it as a 4.3, whatever. But there are 8 5-star reviews in there. You can read about those. So thanks again to those who left reviews. I launched a newsletter about 3 weeks ago. Goes free of charge, this newsletter. Goes out on a Saturday morning usually, if I remember to send it. It's a look at what's been happening in markets, a look at the hot market I'm going to be watching in the week ahead. It might surprise a few people, next week's market. A trading tip, tomorrow's is a good one, to try and make you a better trader, and some stuff about my recent trading. If you go to the website, jonesthemarkets.com, and scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a box in there to fill out. And if you're on the list for tomorrow, there's the website. So if you're on the list by tomorrow morning, you'll get the thing. So you've got to go all the way down, and it's down there. It took me about 3 days to figure out how to put that on the website. Website editing is not my natural skill set. So go to Jones the Markets. You can sign up for the newsletter. Get that every week. Any questions about anything at all? As I often say, I don't have all the answers. Absolutely not. But I do have an opinion. I've been doing this for a long time. Any questions, drop me an email, dj@davidjonestrading.com. Okay, that's that. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the markets. Where should we start? Let's start with stocks. It feels like it's been a scrappy week this week. I mean, I was complaining a bit to people on the WhatsApp group the last couple of weeks of January that I was a bit tired of looking at markets for 3 months. Poor old me. And I came into it with a fresh pair of eyes this month. And it just all feels a little bit scrappy this week. I'm hoping next week's a bit better with these inflation numbers. But let's start off. Let's start off with the S&P, the broader US stock market index. So, as I was saying last week, it looks like this market's breaking out. Trying to get a move on, trying to stage a recovery. Been a bit of a choppy week. It's sold off the last couple of days or so. But for me, should we bring an RSI in? There we go. I know some people like the old squiggles at the bottom. We do have this recovery going on. I'd still be, from a medium-term point of view, absolutely, for me, I'd be a buyer of dips on the S&P now, rather than a seller of rallies. The question is, how far does the dip go? So I think that could be interesting next week. Maybe around about 4,000, something like that. Sort of 38.80 to 4,000, that sort of area. Perhaps we'll see a bit of strength coming back in for the S&P. It was overbought 2nd of Feb, last Thursday. It's rolled over the last couple of days. But for me, be looking to buy the dip in the S&P next week and see if it can start springboarding its way up to perhaps the August, the summer highs, perhaps eventually around about 43.20. Let's see what happens. But for me, happy to be a buyer of dips on the S&P. Same with the Nasdaq, really. I mean, the Nasdaq's quite interesting down here. So the Nasdaq again, we had this this sell-off obviously from Jan last year. Broke out through the old, which is a real problem area. This sort of 12,200 area for the Nasdaq from November through to December. Broken out, sold off. So for me now, it's how far does the sell-off go, and I want to be a buyer of the dip on the sell-off, really. So maybe the low we've seen so far today, which I'm guessing is in pre-market trading. The market's been open about 10 minutes. About 12.2 will be a level. If not that, 11.8 I think could be another important level. So for me, watching these markets next week to see where the dip stops in the S&P and the Nasdaq, assuming it is going to stop. Let's see what happens this week. So yeah, not much exciting really to say more about these markets compared to where they were a couple of weeks ago. What else do we need to talk about? German market. I mean, the DAX. Let me just tidy this up a bit. You know, it's absolutely outperformed the US markets in recent months. You know, the DAX broke out of its downtrend November last year. Has had this new trend. It's building up. Did hit yesterday very briefly a new high yesterday for that recovery. Traded back to where it was in Feb last year. So a 12-month high we had on the DAX yesterday. So again, you know, for me and the DAX, same old stuff. I'll be looking to buy a dip. Let's see where the dip goes. Good support, I think, good short-term support. 14.9 to 15,000, which is 300 points lower than where we are now. We do have a bit of bearish divergence on the DAX. If you look at the RSI, hit a high in Jan, pushed higher into early Feb. The RSI made a lower high. So suggestion that perhaps it's running out of steam. Let's see what happens. But a buyer of a dip on the old DAX. FTSE, same old stuff. FTSE, I mean, the FTSE's hit fresh all-time highs, I think, this week, isn't it? Up at wherever it is. Burst out through these old highs, which is interesting. So again, for me, buyer of the dip. It's the same old story in stocks. You know, FTSE just yesterday hit a new high for this recovery. If we see these markets under a bit of pressure next week, where does it stop? I would be watching about 7.7 on the FTSE if we see it drop that low. Again, this bearish divergence thing on the FTSE pushes to a high, RSI makes a high, pushes a bit higher, RSI makes a lower high. So that's pretty interesting to see what happens. I've just seen Nick's mentioned the old Japan 2225. Let's have a look at that one. I always forget to look at that. From memory, this was pretty boring, but let's have a look. Would you be a seller? I suppose, I don't know. For me, it's boring market, this one, for me. The last 12 months, it's been in a sideways range. I suppose if you had to absolutely sell it anywhere, it's a good place to sell. You know, an aggressive sell. If we were looking on the hourlies, what's it look like on the hourlies? Oh, it's a bit, again, it's just scrap-a-rama, isn't it? That's confused me more than added anything to it. So I suppose if you thought, actually, stock markets have come a long way, they're a bit vulnerable now, and you want to go short the Japanese 225, then an aggressive stop for me would be at 28,000, just above those recent highs. So 500-600 points higher than where we are now. Let's see what happens. But pretty just sideways, isn't it? The old DAX. The FTSE 250. Oh, look at that. FTSE 250. This is an ETF, I think, of the FTSE 250. So the next 250 biggest companies on the UK stock market after the FTSE 100. Arguably a better representation of the UK economy than the FTSE 100, because so many FTSE companies are big international companies like HSBC and BP and Shell and all that lot. I'd be a buyer of a dip on the FTSE 250. Still weak today, but again, another interesting market for me to see where the slide stops next week. Sort of 1840 to 1870. Let's see what happens next week. So yeah, I think still weak stock markets today on Friday, but I think they're going to be interesting to next week. See if they have a bit of a bounce back next week. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at oil. Let's go slightly off piste. I'm long oil at the moment actually, but yeah, it's just been scrappy, and nothing much has changed from a what is it? Sort of medium term point of view for me on oil. The trend has been down since June of last year. It has broken out of the trend. It's broken out of the trend slightly in January, but it can't get through these old highs at 83, 70, 84. But we do have support down at 70-ish, and it's in the middle. So, it's still strong today. Is it going to push up and run out of steam again ahead of 83, 83, 70, 84? I don't know. I'm long at the moment. It's not moved much in my favour. It's moved a bit in my favour. Maybe we'll get a squeeze up next week, but from a medium-term point of view, I think it's still a boring market. It needs to break and make its mind up. I think if it breaks through 84, I'd be looking for a run back up only to these October highs, maybe at 94. I mean, it's still $10, isn't it? Let's see what happens. But it has been, as you can see, how many months now? For 2 months. 2 months we've been stuck in this just sideways range for thingy. Oil, bit dull. Natural gas, the Widowmaker. Brace yourselves. I bought natural gas this week. I couldn't resist it. I had to jump in with everybody else who's been picking the bottom in natural gas. So I'm long natural gas at the moment, which, looking at the medium-term trend, you don't really long natural gas, do you? But, the trend has absolutely been down. I did a video this week on natural gas. And what was interesting, I can't remember the stats, but I quoted Goldman Sachs in the video. So Goldman Sachs said, and in a recent note, I think in the last week, the US energies like natural gas are in the beginning of their bearish cycle or something like that. And I remember thinking, well, natural gas is down 75%, and just now we decided it's bearish. And I just think that from a sentiment point of view, it has come so far. Is everybody too bearish? I absolutely don't think it's going to be troubling $6 anytime soon. But I do wonder if it's a bit too oversold down here. We'll look at the hourlies in a minute, and I'll show you the reason for the trade. Because based off that chart, you absolutely wouldn't do the trade. Wouldn't be a buyer of natural gas. But if you have a look on the weeklies, I think I said last time around, I do wonder these old lows, 226 from end of December 2020, so 2-year lows on natural gas. Are we going to see some strength come in? Let's see. The trend is absolutely down. And like I say, I do not think we're going to see a runaway move in natural gas. But I bought it this week. And it's slightly against me at the moment, so I am slightly underwater. But I bought it. I bought the dip after here. It had a bit of, this is the hourly chart now. So we'd had a couple of days where it was sort of getting a bit of a move on. And I thought, I wonder if we're going to get a bit more of an oversold bounce in natural gas. Sold off, bought the dip, bought too early. It did spike briefly to a new low for the move, and we've recovered. Let's see. My stop is the other side of these lows, right? So if natural gas does sell off from here and make new lows again, I am out of the trade. I'm taking the loss, yeah? I'm not going to still be sitting there with my natural gas position when natural gas is trading at $1.50. But let's see what happens. So I thought it was interesting. If it runs back up to 2.7, 2.75 and has a break, then maybe it starts to run to $3. So from a short-term point of view, it's interesting. I thought a few people might find it amusing that I've actually bought natural gas this week. Let's see what happens. But absolutely, that downtrend, the big downtrend, is still down. I still think it's vulnerable to getting slammed. So even if it does run up to 3, which would be a good trade for me, I'd be a bit nervous. But let's see. Let's see what happens if we picked up. Let me pick up on the trend on this thing, on the hourly chart. See what that looks like. I mean, that's still down, isn't it? David Jones, what are you doing? Trading against the trend. Let's see. I mean, the trend even from there is still down. So the absolute textbook approach would still be to be a seller of natural gas, but I just couldn't resist the call of the counter trend this week. So let's see what happens with that one. So that's it. So so oil, bit boring. Natural gas, never a dull moment in natural gas. Let's see what happens next week on that crazy market. What else should we look at? We look at some currencies. Dollar index. I did go short the dollar this week. Medium term trade on the dollar. We'll see how it turns out. But I think it's in quite an interesting area, the dollar index. So this is the dollar against a basket of other currencies. It did, just last Thursday, a week yesterday, punch to new lows for this down move, but it has recovered strongly. Impressive rally in the dollar. But for me, I am taking the view, well, the trend is still down. The trend is still down off the September highs. And this trend since November is absolutely still down. So I went short in here a couple of days ago. Still short, wide stop. Let's see what happens. For me, at the moment, the dollar has to break through 105.60 to suggest this trend is changing. It is an interesting area because, again, 101 was an important low from back in May. So let's see. And those inflation numbers next week from the US, I would absolutely expect them to have an impact one way or the other on the dollar index. So let's see what happens. But yeah, trend still down, but good support at 101. And again, not much this week, is there? That was Monday. Had a bit of a move on Monday. We've been sideways since then. Pound against the dollar, we looked at that at the start. Oh my God, what's happened there? Let me switch this. How do I switch this news off? I thought I was being very clever showing news before I started. Let's get rid of that. Latest news, only future events. There we go. Let's do that. So what have we got? I mean, we did have... I do think short term we could see a bounce, like going into next week for the pound. But we know this 124.40 to 124.50 has been a problem. So I would be a buyer of a big dip on the pound. I just wonder what's going to happen up here. Let's see. Let's see what happens over the next week. But it is, even after getting hit overnight, well, not so much overnight, yesterday afternoon, and we had that slightly better than expected data today, I'd probably still be a buyer of the pound in the short term and see, do we get a bit of a run up to 122.60, and ultimately, does it have a look back at these old 124.50 levels? Let's see what happens on that. Euro dollar, still under a bit of pressure, the euro against the dollar, but this is another market. We looked at it, this break out of the downtrend line in November. For me, absolutely, the trend since September is up. I want to be a buyer of dips on euro dollar. I would quite like to buy this dip. I'm probably going to wait till Monday to see what happens. But if I was a buyer now looking for a medium term swing up in the euro, I would still want my stop the other side of 104.80, which would be 200 and something 50 points away from where we are now. But my target for the euro in the short to medium term is for a run back up to 110 and perhaps even higher. Let's see. The question, as usual, is how deep does the dip go before that happens? Let's see what happens. But again, you can see a pretty flat week for the euro against the dollar. So that's those done. Bit of currencies. Let's take a look at gold. Gold just about sums up the week for me in gold. I was watching gold, the little trend all this week, chugging a little bit higher. There's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all going okay, and then ba-bang. Yesterday, bit of dollar strength, and the gold thing gets slammed. I did a video yesterday on gold. It's on the channel. Just wondering have we already seen the high for the year on gold? Bit of a clickbait title, but I think it's quite interesting that we've had this massive run in gold from the November low, 1620 to 1960, so 340 points. What's that? 20% move in the price of gold. And what's the argument for gold trading through 2000 and threatening the all-time highs in gold? A US dollar collapse, okay, but I can't see that happening at the moment. Even last year on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it couldn't break the old all-time highs. Economic collapse. It's difficult for me to see why gold should go a lot higher as the year goes on. I don't know. Let's see what happens. But you can see just today it has dropped down to its worst levels since January. So I was quite surprised by that. I'd probably still be a buyer of the dip. If we flip it over to an hourly chart, let's see what it looks like. So if I was going to pick up on, let's say from these lows down here, something like that. It has, you can see it was hugging that trend line, and it's sort of collapsed. So not collapsed, that's over dramatic. But I suppose if you were going to be aggressive and say, well, look, it's had a bit of a silly move. Gold, I still fancy being a buyer. then for me, if I was a buyer now thinking, well, maybe it's going to have one last look at 1960, 1950, I'd probably want my stop loss the other side of Jan lows. They're also the lows for the year, 18, 25, 23, something like that. So I think it's quite interesting. Interesting one to watch next week, but it was doing such a great job on that trend line. I just thought, no, I don't really fancy this anymore. And bang, it's gone. Let's see what happens. I think if it trades below, if it goes to new lows for the year, it goes below 18.20, I think we could see a much deeper sell-off for the price of gold. So a bit of a strange couple of days, I thought, for that one. Silver. Let's have a look at silver. What's silver done? That's sold off a bit as well. I mean, I often say I really don't like silver, but it's down at 22. It's pushed below. It's traded again briefly, lowest since November last year. Okay, so still under pressure, oversold. Really does its own thing, silver. So I suppose if we saw a bit of stability come in next week, perhaps it's going to push its way back into the range. I don't know. I mean, I don't like it, silver. But let's see. I mean, next big support is down at $20.60. Let's see what happens on silver. Could you, if we picked up on those highs, when were those highs? Feb 2021. What does that trend look like? Could somebody make the argument we were still in? Oh, you couldn't you? Look at that. You could absolutely make the argument we were still in a 2-year downtrend for silver. I missed that one. Yeah, interesting. If you believe that 2-year downtrend, then the target is a run down to about $18 from here at least. Let's see what happens. It's pretty oversold on the RSI. It wouldn't surprise me if it had a bit of a blip back up into the range, but yeah, I'm not a fan of silver at the best of times. Okay, so we've done gold, silver, done the energies, Bitcoin. Let's have a look at Bitcoin. That has been hit, hasn't it? I did say I should go short, and the dip would be interesting. It was interesting this week. I think I talked about it a bit, and my reasons for going short when it was up here were really to do with the psychology of it, of someone who's holding Bitcoin, who's probably bought Bitcoin a lot higher up, has seen the price get decimated. So maybe an exaggeration, and then has seen the thing this year rally 50%. And I thought that actually, if we see Bitcoin under pressure, I wonder if we see some panic selling. So we have seen it take a bit of a knock. I would like to see it sell off a bit deeper and see where it stops. So let's see. I think if it breaks through 25, let's call it 26,000, perhaps then that could be, we're off to the races again with Bitcoin, and we could see a run much higher. I still think it's perhaps a bit vulnerable here, but what will be interesting to me, if it wiggles back down below 20,000, where do the buyers come back in? Let's see what happens with that one. So that's it. That's the markets, the usual markets looked at. We'll now look at the markets you want looking at. But don't forget, newsletter goes out tomorrow. Go to the website, jonesthemarkets.com, to sign up for that. Trading course, information is on the website with more detailed performance and all the trades I did in the 3-month period. And any questions, drop me an email, dj@davidjonestrading.com. Okay, let's have a look at your questions. Let's have a quick look. That's a very Welsh name, Push du Village, Push D, Blackpool. Platinum. I'm long platinum at the moment. It hasn't worked out, but I'm long platinum at the moment. You could say that was a big downtrend, wasn't it? I went long platinum this week or last week, end of last week, can't remember, because it had a bit of a run up, and I would have bought it about here, I think, because even though it'd fallen out the downtrend, we still had big support down at 967, and I've got a stop at 940. So I'm in the trade underwater. I think I'm risk getting stopped out. It needs to get a move on from here. If it slips lower, that trend is definitely over. So at the moment, you could say, okay, give it the benefit of the doubt and say yesterday is a false break. It has today held above yesterday's low. So we've seen it break out, but no follow through. It needs to start rallying next week. Otherwise, I'll be out of the trade for a loss. And I think the risk is it's just going to tail back off to where it was last year. So it's interesting down here. I mean, it is, if I wanted to desperately hang on to my reason for being bullish, It is oversold down here on the old RSI. Let's see. You could say the big trend, like silver a bit, the big trend is down on platinum. I don't know. Let's see what happens. But yeah, it's break or bust time, I think, for platinum down here. So if it break, what was yesterday's low on platinum? The low was 953 on platinum. So I'm a big fan of keeping records. For those of you who've been on the course know this. And one of the things I keep a record of, how far does a trade go against me and still ends up being a profitable trade? Okay, so if let's say my stop is 100 points away, if a market goes 70 points into that, it's very rare that ends up being a profitable trade. So for me, with platinum, I think it has eaten in, perhaps not far off 70%. So it's absolutely, statistically, not looking like it's going to turn around for me. But let's see. Let's see what happens next week. XMI. XMI. What is XMI? Let's have a look. New York Stock Exchange ARCA Major Market Index. Now, you see, you spiked my interest there. What is that? ARCA Major Market Index. It's probably nothing, but the American price-weighted stock market index made up of 20 blue-chip industrials of major US corporations. Okay, so it's a big blue-chip index. All right, fair enough. So a bit like the Dow in a way, but not like the Dow. I mean, that looks more bullish than the S&P and the Nasdaq, doesn't it? The old ARCA. So you know, we had a downtrend. That downtrend's gone. The market just this week broke out to its best levels since April of last year. So for me, like in other stock markets, it's a buy the dip market. It's just how far the dip goes. But yeah, I would be a buyer of the dip on the old ARCA. So yeah, I'll be watching that level there, 2960. It's currently 3040. So I think, again, another one, if we get a bit of a pullback next week and a bit of strength comes back in, it looks interesting. I never even knew about that market before. So there you go. The ARCA looks like a buy the dip, and now I've lost the chat. Hold on a second. Could you give your opinion about Alibaba and Disney? Didn't Disney take a real whack this week? Alibaba. They have broken out, haven't they? They have. I remember those from the old days. That downtrend was relentless, wasn't it? From $300 down to about 60, and absolutely in recovery mode. So for me, buy the dips. For me, it's a buy the dip trade. So we hit a low in October. It looks perhaps something like that. Boom, there you go. Maybe even buy the dip now. If I was a buyer today, the closest I would put my stop would be the other side of 96. So they're trading at 105 at the moment. So yeah. The recovery has continued in that one after being down for such a long time. What was the other one? Disney. What Disney? Oh, it's interesting, isn't it? Oh, look at that. Textbook. So we had this downtrend that we've clearly looked at this before because the downtrend line is on there. So I picked up on the downtrend from September 2021. It's been going, what's that? Nearly a year and a half then, isn't it? Blipped up this week. Short central for me. Yeah, so go short for me. If I was going short today, the closest I'd have my stop. How true is that price? Let's just flip things over to an hourly for a second. Oh yeah, it did sort of jump up yesterday on the open. Did they have earnings or something this week? Something happened this week. I remember them being in the news. Whatever. I put my stop above 120. And look to see if we can follow this trend down, and does it go back to $85 on Disney. So interesting move this week. It was being very overbought on the RSI. Too early, the RSI was. But yeah, the downtrend is still very much in place for Disney. The gas crew is still rolling. Yes. What's your opinion on the S&P 500 situation? Is this just a counter-trend rally? Yeah, I looked at that, didn't I? We looked at the S&P. So for me, I'm a buyer of the dip of the S&P. Can we have a look at DJT? David Jones Trading. It's probably not the same. Dow Jones Transportation's similar. The Dow Jones Transportation Index. So that's obviously the transportation companies. It's a bit scrappy, that data, isn't it? I mean, for me, I'd be a buyer of the dips again. It's perhaps not as clear a buyer of the dip as some of the other stock markets we've looked at. But if we picked up on the old September lows, buy the dips again. Where's the dip stop? 14,000 looks like an interesting level on the Dow Jones Transportations. 14,000, there you go. So it's just below 15 at the moment. Let's see what happens next week. Pretty overbought again on the on what sits on the RSI. But yeah, buy the dip market. Love your presence on YouTube. Thanks very much. A technical question about Feb drawing, please. When we draw Feb, do you mean Fib? Fibonacci? Should we use high and low to high and low or closing price? I'm guessing you mean Fibonacci. I hate Fibonacci. I think it's utterly ridiculous. But the way you should do it is, I would do it from the extremes, right? So let's see, is this button here Fibonacci? Fibonacci retracements, yeah. So you should go, like on the Dow Transportation, look at those beautiful colours. So we go from the lows to the high, right? And then that is the 23.6% fib level, 38.2, 50%, 61.8. So for me, I'd always take it from the extremes. And that's how I do it on the fibs. Not that I ever look at them. When drawing trend lines, high and low or the closing price should be considered. High and low. For me, you'll see it, when I draw my trend lines, it goes through all the price data. I've got no interest in just drawing it through the closes. I want to draw it through the extremes. Nvidia. What's happening with Nvidia? Wow, they've had a good run, haven't they? So they broke out the trend line there. I wouldn't have believed it. Would have gone short if I watched it and actually traded stocks. Would have gone short, perhaps at 175. But now this looks like an absolute proper trend reversal. So for me, I would definitely switch now from being a seller of strength into a buyer of the dips. And as usual, the only question is, and it's a big question, how far does the dip go? I mean, that is accelerated like a maniac, isn't it? What was it? Jan, it was 145. It's been as high as 230. So for me, I'd want to be quite patient on this one. I suppose an aggressive trade if you absolutely wanted to be a buyer of Nvidia sooner rather than later. We flip it to the hourlies. If I was a buyer today, if it calmed down a bit, I could be tempted to be if I actually traded stocks. I would put my stop loss under 207, will be the absolute closest, and I'd probably want it down here somewhere. But yeah, it's had a great run. But for me on the dailies, it's perhaps got a bit overcooked. I've got too many trend lines there. Yeah. But absolutely, if it had a much deeper sell-off, I'd be a buyer. It'd look interesting to me. But yeah, that's definitely, to me, that looks like it's reversed the trend. Is gold? We did gold. Nat gas. Welcome to the Nat Gas Club. Yeah, we did the euro. Hang on a second. We need to have we should at a Zoom meeting, like a natural gas addicts club. We should all sit there and talk about why natural gas should be trading at $5. Right, I've lost my space in the thingy, the chat. Hang on a second. There's a lot of natural gas fans in here. It's weird that just YouTube, the natural gas video I did about 3 weeks ago, 15,000 views that's got, and I normally get about 500 to 700 views, and it does show, and it's really, and I would never have predicted that. It does show there's a load of private retail trader interest in natural gas, and I think there is only so much interest because it's fallen so far. Markets that have fallen like a stone do act a bit like flames to moths, because it is, 2 years ago it was quite a niche market, natural gas, but it seems to have got really popular. Lumber, yeah. See, I've got lumber in my watch list. I think it's a really interesting market, lumber, and it has it was absolutely sailed down from 540, beginning of Feb, to where we are now, 430. Big drop, isn't it? It's nearly 20% drop in lumber. But I do wonder with lumber, is it going through a trend reversal? So the interesting thing for me in lumber, as usual, it's the old squiggle trade. How far does this go? Does it go down here? We see a bit of buying come in, bang. So I definitely do think I'll be buying lumber at some point when it stops going down, because the test of the old lows down at 365 will be interesting. What happens down there? Let's see. Let's see what happens. I can never delete these drawings when I've done it. Oh, okay, we'll just leave it there. TJX. Let's have a look at TJX. TJX Companies Inc. What do they do? Retail trade, apparel and footwear retail is the sector in. Breakout, isn't it? So it's a breakout stock. Looks like that. I suppose if I really wanted to buy them, I'd be buying out at $80 and I would put my stop loss the other side of the breakout. So down maybe 75. But, you know, breakouts normally considered bullish. Just because something breaks out doesn't mean it's going to go racing away. You sometimes need to be a bit patient. But, yeah, I think that looks positive, isn't it? I'd be a buyer of a bigger dip as well. But interesting to see if it can hold on to the breakout up here and stay above 75. That's a couple of requests for that. AMD, that's the Advanced Micro Devices, isn't it? This is another one that's interesting, a bit like Nvidia, where it is perhaps turning the corner. So for me, buy with a dip. I think, you know, I'd absolutely have been selling short here. I wouldn't have believed the break. But now we've broken out, we've broken the old highs, I'd be a buyer of a dip. I'd rather see a bigger dip down to maybe the low 70s, currently trading 81. But another interesting one to watch, the old AMD. Where's that come from? 165 down to 60. Big old sell-off. So let's see. Let's see what happens. Short gold on until inflation comes back. Fair enough. Silver. Wheat medium term recovery buy. I'm still in this wheat. I've been in this wheat trade forever, and it's not gone anywhere. Oh yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, I bought it. Do you know? I think I bought it in August. I think I've been in the trade since August, and it went up for a bit, and then it sold off. Yeah, I think I think if you thought the bottom was in on wheat, it's interesting down here, and I would have my stop loss the other side of 700, whatever that is, cents probably. So interesting. Can it get a move on? I hope so. Let's see what happens. We do have a bit of a hurdle, short-term hurdle. Last end of December high at 780. If it breaks that, perhaps we'll get a run up to the 900s again. Let's see what happens. But I even forget I've got that trade on. It just sits there and does nothing. So let's see. But interesting, I think, that it's held down at those levels. Nvidia, we look at Nvidia. Lyft got smashed today. Is that the ride-hailing company, the old taxi, like an Uber, isn't it? Oh my God, it did, didn't it? What happened there? It must be earnings, mustn't it, or something? Let's have a quick look. Lyft. Profit outlook misses Wall Street expectations. Ouch. Where does that come from? So when it debuted, it was $88 a share, and here it is at 10. So if you were going to be an absolute aggressive nutcase, so if you're part of, you know, if a market like natural gas just wasn't spicy enough for you and you wanted a bit more action, you know, you could take the view, well, the market's overreacted to this run in Lyft, this move in Lyft. So they went from $9.60 to $18.50. It doubled in about 5 weeks. So you could take the view, aggressive trade, be a buyer if it stabilises. Let's see, what's it doing? We're only an hour into the day though, aren't we? Okay, we've not got much to go on. Be a buyer, stop loss either side of $9.50. Let's see what happens. If you think the market has had a little bit of an overreaction, let's come back to it. Let's add it into the list. We'll come back to it next week and see how wrong I was. lift, palladium. Palladium. Oh, do you know, palladium was a great market a few years ago for me. Trickier since then. Absolutely crazy market sort of here. 2018, gosh, it's even longer than I thought. 2019, and then the last gasp into 2020. That's really been hit, hasn't it? Let's have a look. I mean, the trend is down. Big level at 1540 on palladium. I would say the trend from up here is down. Wonder why it's doing so badly, palladium, because it's made in catalytic converters, isn't it? It's in catalytic converters for cars, one of the applications. Is it because fewer cars are being made because of supply chain stuff? I don't know. Trend is down. Interesting down here, though. Interesting market to watch next week, palladium. Let's add that into the list. Does it manage to hold above the old lows, or is it just going to go below? I mean, it's a big level from back here as well. Look at it. COVID levels when it went nuts. I remember because I was still long some of it, and then it got absolutely tanked. 1540 is a big old level. If it breaks that, it's at its worst levels since August 2019. 3.5 year lows in palladium. Let's have a quick Google. Why is palladium falling? I'm just getting a load of gold price news. All right. Well, that's useless, isn't it? I suppose EVs, electric vehicles, don't use palladium, do they? I don't know. Whatever. Let's see where it is next week. Okay, natural gas rising quick. Natural gas. Let's have a quick look at that. It's not doing much. It's getting a bit choppy. It's just choppy at the moment. Natural gas. We need to get a move on. If Lyft was smashed, because that'd be a good reason to sell Uber. Yeah, it'd be interesting to read a bit more about that Lyft profit expectations. I mean, Uber they're not taking much of a hit though. They gapped a bit lower, so they closed yesterday at $35.90. They opened about $1.50 lower, but they are recovering. Uber. I mean, Uber doesn't look too bad, does it? Uber hit its highs a couple of days ago, the best levels in nearly a year, didn't they? So yeah, let's see. I think that Lyft one is quite interesting though to watch. CCJ has done well. What's CCJ? CCJ Cameco Corp. What do they do? Non-energy minerals. Okay. Looks again a little bit boring to me, that one. Pushing toward, but trend has been up absolutely since the December lows. Pushing towards the top of the range. The top of the range for the last year or so. So for me, not much excitement for me in that one, but let's see. Wheat's moving up. Microsoft. I've looked at it for ages. Microsoft. Let's have a look. Microsoft Corp. What are they doing? Now that is quite interesting. Microsoft. So if we took that to there, right? So if we took that chart, that's going back to November 2021 highs. Trend is still down. Absolutely nice little short there on Microsoft. Middle of December, around $260. Goes back to the trend line. Breaks the trend line. I wouldn't believe that. I'd be thinking about going short. But is it trying to break out? I think that's an interesting one to watch, Microsoft. I could even be tempted to be a buyer of the dip on Microsoft. That finally, maybe, it's trying to break out. So for me, if I was a buyer today, and I don't think it would be a buyer today, if we saw a bit of strength next week, I'd probably want my stop the other side of maybe 250 or somewhere. And we do have this bearish divergence thing going on the RSI. So the market's pushed to a high, pushed a bit higher. We've got lower highs on the RSI. So bearish divergence does suggest that maybe it's a bit overcooked. But that's another interesting one. Let's add that into the old keep an eye on pot. See what that looks like in a week's time. Google. Alphabet. Trend still down for me on that one. Let's have a look. Looks something like that. Even though it's had a little bit of a breakout. It's a bit tricky, that one for me. Don't know. I'm going to have to ignore that. Aussie dollar GBP. AUD GBP. Let's have a look. That looks a bit boring to me. What do you think? Is it normally quoted the other way around? It doesn't matter, does it? It's a bit sideways to me, doesn't it? I suppose, if I had to do a trade, what trade I would be a buyer of the Aussie rather than a seller of the Aussie. But it's all a bit scrapperama, isn't it? I mean, you could take the view that the trend is up, something like that, and it has sort of broken out. So if I was a buyer now at 57, the closest I want my stop, I don't know, 56.50, something like that. It's just a bit scrappy though. What's it look like on an hourly chart? A little bit scrappy. But, you know, yeah, I don't know, it's just a bit sideways, isn't it? By Ford. Ford, did they announce big cuts to their electric cars the other week, along with Tesla. By Ford. It's a bit sideways, and it's a bit in the middle of the range, isn't it? For me anyway. So there's no real trend there. So there's nothing too exciting for me. Absolutely, if it got knocked back down below $12, looks a bit more interesting. It does look like the downtrend has ended. You know, it hit nearly $26 a year ago, and then it more than halved. $10.50 is good support, but it's just been a bit boring, isn't it, since last summer. CCJ is uranium. I was looking at a completely different market then. Why is it coming up? It's not coming up here. Oh, Cameco. That was that uranium. Okay, fair enough. Non-energy minerals. I don't know anything about uranium. FUM. What's FUM? The natural gas index. Isn't that not just going to be the same as natural gas? What is that then? I don't even know what that is. I mean, that would be a buy, actually, whatever that is, the natural gas index. Is it an index of stocks that are involved in the natural gas industry? I got no idea. You could say the trend is, I mean, you'd be a buyer at 29.40 with a stop under 27.50. I don't actually know what that is, though. So we'll flip off that. Tesla. I thought they were going to run out of steam at $200. What happened? Oh, they're having a little look through it. That's quite interesting, that on Tesla. So I did a video on Tesla a few weeks ago, and I thought this trend was down. Tesla's having a bit of a run, but it's going to run out of steam. However, it has punched through $200. I thought $200 would be the ceiling for Tesla. So the interesting thing now is, as usual, where does the dip stop? If it sells off a bit from here, where does the dip stop? It did make new highs for that move just yesterday, so I'd absolutely be a buyer of a dip. So yeah, I was wrong on Tesla. Write that down. I was wrong. Go on, Kapud. You're just sitting there going through the whole Nasdaq, are you? Hang on a second. ASML Holdings. What is it? Let's have a look on the dailies. Yeah, I'd be a buyer. A bit scrappy for me, that one, but I've got no idea what they are. Electronic technology, semiconductors, blah, blah, blah. And as usual with all this stuff, it's the dip. I'll be buying the dip. How far does the dip go? It looks a little bit weak at the moment, but I'll be buying the dip. Lyft does seem the most exciting right now. I'm quite intrigued by that one. I think whenever a market has a bit of a crazy reaction, it's always an interesting one to watch. If you fancy a bit of short-term action, so there it is on the 5-minute chart, has the market overreacted? So a lot of my trades, not on that sort of extreme, are when the market has perhaps overreacted to something. But let's see what happens. But like I say, if they went much below, it depends on your time frame. If they took out $9.50, I'd be out of there definitely, because that would be new all-time lows for Lyft. But it's an interesting one to watch. What's your opinion on trading options? I have traded options off and on for 15 years. I think the way that most people trade options is unprofitable because people use it. They'll buy. There was a guy, I don't know if he's on here at the moment, but there's a guy who had Tesla 200 call options. So I think most people use it to trade directionally. So they'll take a market like whatever, IBM, let's say IBM. take a market like IBM, and rather than buying a stock or buying a CFD or buying a spread bet, they'll buy an option. So they might buy, they think IBM is going to go up, so they might buy a 140 call option. The problem with using options for directional trading, I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, the frustrating thing about that is because of the time premium built into options, you can still be right on the direction the market moves, but if it doesn't move there quick enough, you can still lose money. So if you're curious about that, Google time decay options. So I like options, but not for directional trading. I like options more for when markets are sideways and you expect them to continue being sideways. So, but that's a whole other topic, that is. So there you go. SMH, the ETF for semiconductors. SMH, looked at this before, haven't we? The VanEck Semiconductor ETF. Yeah, it looks good, doesn't it? Breaking out, continues to break out. Buy the dips, usual stuff. Interesting to see where this dip stops at the moment. It's quite nice. I do like an ETF. That's quite an interesting ETF, that one. I mainly do, I think I've said before, S&P 500 and NASDAQ ETFs in my pension. So, but that's quite an interesting one, isn't it? The old VanEck Semiconductor ETF. Workspace. Is Workspace the old shared office thingy-majiggy? Or am I getting confused? Am I getting confused with something else? Workspace group. Maybe I'm getting confused. I think I'm getting confused, aren't I? And WeWork, that's what I was thinking of. WeWork, what do they do? Workspace group. Real Estate Investment Trust. Okay. A REIT. Another one where I think, a trend, I would say the trend has ended on that one, on Workspace. I'm sure I've had shares in these before in the past. Be buy the dip on that one, for me. Nice little move, isn't it? What was the low? The low was, I think this is pounds, isn't it? £3.40 in October, and here we are at £5.20. So I'll be a buy of the dip on that, on the old, the Workspace REIT. We looked at Bitcoin. You can have a look. Once this is finished, you can rewind and go. It's probably about 15, 20 minutes in. Bitcoin, I've got to start wrapping things up in a minute. JLP, Jubilee Metals Group. Ugh, what a horrible chart. Is that 11 pence? Is that 11 pence? I hate these penny stocks. Let me just check that. People love a penny stock. Jubilee Metals Group, I'm guessing it is P, isn't it? Yeah, it's down 1 point. Now for me, the trend is down, isn't it? So I'd be a seller of strength in Jubilee Metals. So yeah, it's interesting, the old penny stock. Like a lot of people, when I first got involved in markets in my early 20s, used to love a penny stock. Because you think, if you look at something, so I've got, for example, let's pick a big one. Bats. So I've got some shares in Bats that I'm thinking about selling because they perform well, but they're selling off. It's 30 quid a share, right? You think, I've got 300 quid to invest, 30 quid a share. I can only buy 10 shares. If I go and buy Jubilee Metals at whatever it was, 11p a share, I can get so many more of those stocks. That's one of the reasons I think penny stocks do appeal to people. But penny stocks tend to be penny stocks for a reason, and the reason is they're not very good. However, good run in the past. March 2020, 2.5p a share, up to 21p, tenfold increase on your money. But over the last couple of years now, not quite a couple of years, trend is down. So for me, it's not one for me. But if you're in it, good luck with it. That's that. Aussie, the Aussie index, the Australia, the Aussie 200, isn't it, or something like that? Australia 200 index. Let's have a look at that. This is interesting, isn't it? I mean, what would you do with the Aussie? I mean, you could make the argument. You absolutely could. You could make the argument for going short if you really wanted to go short. You know, we're at the top, absolutely at the top of the range. Look at that, the Aussie spikes up, top of the range. 3rd of Feb. This has been a real problem all the way back to August 2021. So more than a year and a half now. So you could go short. The problem is, I mean, perhaps the Aussie index works in a different way, but if suddenly other stock markets are going up, you'd expect the Aussie to go up as well. So a tricky one. Me, I'd rather buy a dip. I'd buy a dip and wait to see if it has another go at 7,600, the old Aussie index. But let's see, it's quite an interesting one, that. I suppose the FTSE is at all-time high. So again, Aussie, I wonder what makes up the Aussie index. Clearly, very like the FTSE, a very different mix to these broader indices like the S&P. Right, we're going to wrap things up there, I think, aren't we? So we're all done, which is good. It's been an hour. So as usual, sign up for the newsletter. It goes out tomorrow. I'm going to finish writing it after this now. Go to the website for that, jonesthemarkets.com. To find out more about my training course, go to the website as well, jonesthemarkets.com. Any questions about anything, drop me an email. Obviously, I can't give like recommendations of what to buy and what to sell and all that stuff. But any general questions about the trading course or trading in general, feel free to drop me an email. I don't respond normally straight away, but I'll normally get back within a couple of days. And that's dj@davidjonestrading.com. We'll do the live stream on probably Tuesday night again next week. I'll carry on doing those for a bit and see how popular they are. Definitely do the live stream this time next week on Friday. Got those inflation numbers out next week. That'd be interesting. See what they look like. That's it, isn't it? So I'm done for the week. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good weekend. Good luck with trading, and see you next week. Are there any discounts for students for your course? No, unfortunately not. No, I can't do. No, I can't. Unfortunately, no. Black Friday, I think, will be the next discount. But any questions, drop me an email. We'll wrap things up there. Thanks for coming along.